Hey everyone, so welcome to the first episode of my Buffy breakdown series. I'm just going to be going through every episode of the show and breaking it down, I guess. The first episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, called Welcome to the Hellmouth, is part 1 of 2. It aired March 10th, 1997. So the episode starts off just like a really classic horror movie, and then we see these kids breaking. If you're a fan of the show, you've probably heard this a bunch of times before, but the idea for the show was basically just to take the little blonde girl from horror movies who walks into an alley and then gets killed, and the idea was to subvert that image and instead make the girl turn around and become the hero of the story, or kill the monster, save the day, which is kind of at the heart of what Buffy the Vampire Slayer is, which is subverting things, subverting our expectations, genres, gender norms, just all the things, basically. I mentioned how the show starts off pretty much like your average horror movie, and that brings another thing into this, that it kind of does some genre busting, where it's a show that has so many different genres in one, where typically we're very one genre. You're a horror show, you're a comedy show, you're a drama show, you're a teen show. So this show really takes the horror, like we see right from the start, and then later on in the episode, in the series, you'll see a ton of comedy, teen stuff, obviously, supernatural, action. Talking about subverting our expectations, those are subverted right from the start, because we have these two kids breaking in, and this little blonde girl, and you think that something's going to happen to her. Also, this guy, I always think that he's the guy from CSI NY. Like that tech guy, but I always call him CSI NY guy. Anyways, our expectations are subverted right from the start. We have this blonde girl, and later on we learn that her name is Darla, and all of a sudden she turns around and her face is really grotesque and looks like a vampire and eats the guy, I guess. Bites his neck, at least. And the idea for the vampire makeup is just basically that they didn't want Buffy to be going around killing her classmates, so then they made them have this really grotesque, demon-y looking makeup on and prosthetics to make them look like this is a monster. This is a vampire. This is not a human person. Which always seemed a little funny to me because, I mean, how many of Buffy's classmates actually turn out to be vampires? I mean, she doesn't really fight vampires who are students very often, but I guess we don't want to see Buffy killing any kind of people. Then you get into the whole, gray area of the vamp face. Like, would you really have that on in that situation or not? I don't know. But it's a fun thing, and it makes it really easy to spot the vampires when they choose to have it. But also the way CSI NY goes, something.
Maybe it's something.
Well, maybe it's something.
It's not funny.
It just kind of plays in a loop in my mind. The opening credits, it starts with a scary organ and then a werewolf howl, which are things from old classic horror movies. But then the rock music comes in. I don't know, I like it. I love the opening theme song. I think it's really, really great. And it's not just that, it's also like, we're not here for your old horror movie. We're not here for all these old things that you're used to, and we're gonna change that up. So then the episode kind of really starts, and we have Buffy having a fitful night of sleep. She's having a lot of nightmares, and all of these shots in this dream sequence are in upcoming episodes. So these are all things that are going to happen in Buffy within the first season of the show. And I always found that kind of cool, going back and watching the show again. You're just like pointing at all the things and you're like, oh, hey, I recognize you. And so it's kind of cool. It's like Buffy's getting a heads up everything that's going to happen, although she never refers to this dream again. She never actually is like, hey, I think I saw you in a dream. I saw this exact sequence. I saw this exact thing in a dream that I had before my first day of school. She never really mentions that, but whatever, it's still kind of cool. They filmed all 12 episodes, all of the first season, before any of it started airing. It was a mid-season replacement, so they could do that. So they did keep going back and adding things or changing things in that first season, and then they could do something like this and have this sequence. So then Buffy wakes up and we find out that it's her first day at a new school, and then we go to this shot of the school, and it's like, okay, so we went from a horror movie, and now we're like in teen drama land. We're especially in teen drama land because this is a school from 90210. This is the school from Beverly Hills 90210. This is West Beverly. I saw Buffy before I ever watched 90210, so I always still think of it as Sunnydale High, but now watching it, I'm like, hey, that's West Beverly. I really can't believe that they used the same school for this, because I feel like it was so well known at that point, especially by the audience, people who are going to be watching this show. And I mean, this school has been used in a lot of other things. I mean, it was used in She's All That, and I don't know, just a lot. Okay, and at the very beginning here, she's getting out of the car and we first see Joyce Summers. We learn from Joyce that Buffy got kicked out of her last school, but she seems pretty cool about it, I gotta be honest. So then we first meet Xander Harris, and Xander comes in riding a skateboard. It's a very cool shot, and that moment where he falls, where he hits the railing and he falls, every time I watch that, I'm like, oh wow, he really bit it for that. Like, it looks like he really did that, and he did. Yeah, we never see Xander on a skateboard ever again. We see him carrying it a couple times, but he's never to get back on that board ever again. They found out that it's a really big hassle to film somebody on a skateboard. Then he goes and he talks to his friend Willow. This is the first time that we see Willow Rosenberg. She comes in with that cute little outfit, and we see that they're friends, and just in this little moment here, we're setting up that Xander is going to be checking out a book for the library today. So we have a friend group that's set up right from the beginning, and the three friends are Xander, Willow, and Jesse. Willow and Xander are set up as two friends from the beginning. Like, it's them first on their own, and then Jesse comes in. So it's just setting up that Willow and Xander have their own relationship outside of their relationship that is Willow, Xander, and Jesse. And then we meet Principal Flutie. I love Principal Flutie. I love this scene. I think this is one of my favorite scenes from the pilot. I remember watching this and being like, is this good acting? I think this is good acting. I love it. I also love Buffy's look right here. We also learn that the school that Buffy came from is Hemery High in LA, and that is the name of the school that Buffy came from in the movie. Buffy the Vampire Slayer was originally a movie in 1992. There's a whole thing about the movie and what happened with that if you want to go into Google and look that up. They ended up making this show a few years later, and I especially love the part where Principal Flutie's like,
Mr. Flutie.
All the kids here are free to call me Bob.
Bob.
But they don't.
and we kind of get a shot of Buffy's outfit, and I just have to say, I love it. I remember the first time that I watched Buffy, and this was like 2011? It was 2012. I remember thinking that the clothes were really dated and not good, just like really bad. And I remember trying to convince my friend to watch the show, and she thought it was kind of dated, and I said, no, you just gotta wait. By the time you get into like the middle or like halfway through season 2, you're not even gonna notice the clothes anymore. So I remember then I was rewatching this episode a little bit later with a friend, and this was like 2016, so only like 4 years later. I remember being like, wow, I like the clothes. And my friend was like, yeah, she's like, I love the clothes in this episode. It's just crazy that 4 years later the clothes went from being dated to really cool again. And I still think they're cool now. So Buffy and Xander meet here. This is kind of like a meet cute. So it's apparent that Xander has a crush on Buffy from the very start. Buffy is very nice and polite, and it doesn't really seem like she's very interested, or more like she's just being nice. Xander is just kind of falling all over himself, so we're just kind of seeing what kind of a character he is, and it's setting that up. I mean, it was set up more succinctly before when he was staring and he fell off the skateboard, but this is just showing that again. And then at the end of this scene, Xander's like,
Hey, you forgot your steak.
I don't know, I always find this kind of funny because if that fell out of someone's purse and I picked it up, I would not think that it was a steak. My mind would not be like, oh, this is a steak. Honestly, if I saw that, I'd just think that it was like a pointy stick. I'd be like, hey, you forgot your stick? Or, okay, so maybe I would say it was a steak. Maybe I'm going back on this. Maybe I would think that it was a steak because I don't know what I would think it was. I think I'd just be like, oh, here's your stick. Or here's your pole. Here's your... So Cordelia is introduced in this scene. Cordelia Chase. She kind of goes for Buffy right away. So I guess she thinks that Buffy seems cool. Cordelia kind of seems cool in this scene. She seems really helpful. This is also the second mention that we have in the episode of the library. Okay, so Cordelia is played by Charisma Carpenter, who originally auditioned for the role of Buffy, and Sarah Michelle Gellar originally auditioned for the role of Cordelia, and she got the role of Cordelia, but then they couldn't find a Buffy, so they asked her to read for Buffy. Cordelia is kind of supposed to be like who Buffy used to be, or who Buffy would be if she wasn't the Slayer. This is what she used to be like at Hemery High, or this is who she would be if she didn't have all this extra responsibility, and if she wasn't being forced to grow up at such a young age so quickly. Cordelia, you can see her maturity takes time, and it takes over the course of 2 different series, but which is maybe where Buffy would have ended up eventually, but since she's just kind of thrust into adulthood. So Cordelia thinks that Buffy is really cool, especially because she's from LA, and Cordelia says that she would love to live in LA. And Buffy passes this cool test that Cordelia sets up.
You passed! Oh, good to hear.
But the fact that Buffy does pass shows us that Buffy was, until recently, or even still is, into all of this stuff. For her part, Buffy just seems to be really happy to be making a friend. I mean, I think it's kind of worth noting that she was also nice to Xander when she met him. So this isn't, maybe we see right from the start that she's a bit different from Cordelia, where Buffy seems to be nice to everybody. Buffy immediately doesn't like it when Cordelia is mean to Willow.
Oh, well, my mom picked it out.
No wonder you're such a guy magnet. Are you done?
Buffy kind of makes it seem like to Cordelia that she's with her, that she's on her side, but we see that Buffy looks really worried and looks really nervous when she's looking after Willow. So this garners some sympathy for Buffy right away because of her reaction, and then also for Willow, obviously, because Willow was just picked on by a mean girl. Also the reference to Sears, I love.
Nice dress. Good to know you've seen the softer side of Sears.
I used to shop at Sears all the time when I was a kid. And I actually really like Willow's dress. So if all this responsibility and duty hadn't been put onto Buffy, then she would have been just like Cordelia. Cordelia sees this and latches onto this, but because of everything that Buffy's been through, she can't be like that completely. Like, she's changed now. She's a different person. And then we're back walking in the same hallway again. I'm like, didn't we just come from there? Isn't that where we just came from? And it was, because in the first season of the show, they only had this one hallway for the school hallway, so they just kept walking back in it. And it's so funny, in the first season, you'll watch them, and they'll be doing like a walk and talk scene, and they'll be walking through the hallway, and then all of a sudden they'll round a corner, and they're right back where they started. Oh, I really relate to the,
It's in the bad part of town.
Where's that?
About a half a block from the good part of town. We don't have a whole lot of town here.
I live in a really small town, and I grew up in a really small town, and it's true. And then we come to the library, the Sunnydale High Library, which is basically headquarters for the show for the first 3 seasons while they're in high school. I love this library. It looks really cool. And then Buffy sees this newspaper with this article circled that says local boys still missing. And I feel bad because we just never see those local boys again. We never hear about them. What happened to them? They're probably dead. R.I.P. local boys. You are still missing. Probably dead. So then we're introduced to the character of Giles, Rupert Giles. So when he first comes in, he seems very posh, very proper. But then he also seems like weirdly delighted and like really gleeful about this whole Slayer thing and the whole vampire stuff. So it's funny, he first comes in and you think, oh, he's very proper and uptight, and then you're like, oh, you really like this vampire stuff, you really enjoy it, don't you? So it's clear from this that Buffy has come here to escape all this vampire stuff and all this Slayer stuff. She doesn't want any part of it anymore.
That's not what I'm looking for.
Are you sure?
I'm way sure.
And then we have these 2 girls talking in like this California teen speak, which is it feels very dated, and I mean that like it feels very dated even for 1997.
Nag. Pause. She was starting fights. Nag, leave.
They don't really do any of this like Cali teen speak later on in the show. They just changed to doing Buffy speak, which is just kind of how the writers talked. And then this girl gives quite the scream, which is a very classic horror movie scream. I mean, she's given the performance of her life here. So then Buffy goes to see Willow, and then she does this little, hey, this little wave thing that always really sticks in my mind. Buffy just seems like one of those popular kids who's really nice to everybody. And I think it's also part of it is that everything that Buffy has gone through recently has made her realize that she should go out of her way to be nice to people, like go out of her way to make them feel welcome. Oh, and then I really love this part.
I heard a rumor that you were the person to talk to if I wanted to get caught up.
So it's like, oh, Buffy was asking about Willow, like she was going around to kids at school and saying, hey, this Willow kid, what's her situation? What's she like? What are her interests? I really like it. It says a lot about Buffy's character. And they say this thing about,
well, not much goes on in a one Starbucks town like Sunnydale.
Hey, excuse me, you've got a Starbucks. You're a sizable town. I live in a small town, and we just got a Starbucks last year. Until recently watching this, I was always like, hey, you're so lucky you have a Starbucks. I love that Willow tries to cover for Buffy here.
Are these guys bothering you?
No.
She's not hanging out with us.
She's cool. She's not like us. We see this friendship forming between Buffy and Willow already. And I love this whole little exchange here.
Totally dead. Way dead.
It's not just a little dead then.
Don't you have elsewhere to be?
I think it's a really good scene. I think the acting here is really good, and I think the writing here is really good, and this is another standout scene to me for this episode, along with that scene with Buffy in Principal Flutie's office. And then Buffy goes into the locker room, and she really just rips open that door. We see that she's really, really, really strong, and she has some kind of superpowers that involve strength. So then Buffy goes to see the body. Why is the body just sitting there? This always is something that always confuses me. I'm like, why is the body just left there unattended, covered with a blanket? I mean, I guess they did lock the door, but I still feel like in a school with a lot of teenagers that maybe you should have someone posted outside that door to make sure that no one breaks in and goes to look at the dead body, because it seems like something that teenagers might do. Let's just leave the body alone in the locker room. Let's throw a blanket over it and like contaminate this crime scene. I'm not saying that that's not something that couldn't happen, especially back then. I mean, Principal Flutie does feel the kind of guy who's like, oh, let's cover up this poor dead boy, and so that, you know, I don't have to keep looking at him anymore. Can we just cover that? And also, why aren't the police there already? I guess they're waiting for the police, but the police response time in Sunnydale seems to be very, very slow. Sunnydale PD, you need to do a little bit better. Also, we see here the contrast between Buffy's reaction to seeing the dead body and that other girl, Aura. Is her name Aura? That other girl at the classic horror movie Scream, Buffy's just totally not fazed by it at all. Like she's seen something. She's seen a lot of dead bodies before, and it's not really bothering her. And then we have this scene between Buffy and Giles. Buffy's side of the scene, her coverage, was filmed 8 months later. So after they had filmed the whole first season, they went back into the scene again. They just did it so that she was a little bit more vulnerable and less angry. They did this with a couple other scenes in the episode that I'm going to point out when we get there. So Buffy, we can see here that she wanted her life to go back to normal, but she can't help but help him, and obviously she wouldn't be there confronting Giles if she didn't want to help. Also, this moment here...
Will he rise again?
I feel like Giles would know the vampirism process and, like, how one becomes a vampire, but I guess it's put in there for exposition to let the audience know. But also maybe you could see it as part of it is he's kind of, like, testing her, like, let's see how much she knows about this. And then here we find out kind of what a Slayer is.
You are the Slayer. Into each generation, a Slayer is born. One girl in all the world, a chosen one born with the
strength and skill to hunt the vampires, to stop the spread of their evil blah, blah, blah. I've heard it, okay?
But two key words here are one and girl. So one, it's only her. She is completely alone in this. She's the only person that's going through this. She is the only person alive right now who knows what she's going through and understands, and who is going through the exact same thing. It is also kind of like being a teenager. A teenager, you feel like you're the only one experiencing these emotions right now, and you're the only one who feels like this. I mean, Buffy really is the only one because she is the only Slayer. And the other word girl, meaning that she's not a woman, she is not an adult, she is a child. And I mean, she's 16 years old. The Slayer is never really meant to become an adult. They're just always meant to be a child, and that's for a lot of reasons. It's a lot easier to control a child. We'll get into that, don't you worry, a lot later when we learn more about the Watchers Council and all that, but for right now, we just know that Buffy is completely alone. The Slayer is supposed to be alone. The Slayer is not supposed to be an adult, even though they have a lot of adult responsibilities thrown onto them very suddenly and very harshly. But they're meant to still be a child. And Buffy's whole prepare me speech.
He prepares her.
Prepares me for what? For getting kicked out of school? For losing all of my friends? For having to spend all of my time fighting for my life and never getting to tell anyone because I might endanger them? Go ahead. Prepare me.
That just really enforces that she is alone in this. She doesn't have any friends. She doesn't have any confidant. It's just her. But then we see that Xander overhears this whole thing. So right away, this is already making Buffy a little bit different than all the other Slayers that have come before her. She's already being set apart because already someone knows about this. Someone who's not supposed to know any of this Slayer stuff and who she is. Someone knows. And also I mentioned this before, but Xander's entrance was set up earlier, saying he was going to go get a textbook from the library, and there he is getting that textbook. But part of me wonders, like, did Giles just forget that Xander was in there? Because I feel like Xander wouldn't be the kind of person who would just walk in there and know exactly where that textbook is that he needs. Like, I feel like he would have had to have asked Giles. So did Giles really just forget that Xander was there? Or maybe Xander knows a lot more about books in the library than I'm giving him credit for. So next we have this great shot where it's like Sunnydale High and the school is very bright and sunny and happy, very teen 90210 kind of, and the camera pans down and we go down below the school. It's really creepy and decrepit, churchy like thing. Now you're back in a horror movie. And then we see this bubbling thing of blood, and it's like, oh, it's bubbling right beneath the surface, like it's so close, and there's all this tension and all this bad stuff right below that could come out at any second. Which is also like being a teenager, which the show does the whole, high school is hell thing, where all the demons and vampires and stuff are a metaphor for the personal demons you have when you're a teenager. And then Buffy's trying to decide what to wear when she goes out to the Bronze tonight, and she holds up a slutty dress, I guess. It is quite the leather dress thing. I mean, I'm sure she would look great in it, but I just have a feeling that Joyce would not approve of that dress. Like, I feel like she wouldn't let her leave the house wearing that to go to the club. And then Buffy says that she used to be so good at this. Like, she used to be so good at things like picking out clothes and the right thing to say. And so she wants to escape her destiny. She wants to escape being a Slayer and go back to her life being normal. But even when she tries to do that, she still can't even do the old things like she used to. Like, it's because she has these more adult concerns now, she just can't go back to that. Also, Joyce seems awfully fine with her going out to a club, which seems kind of weird. She's like, okay, bye, honey, have fun at the nightclub that you're going to on a school night, too. I'm pretty sure it's a school night because I think the next day, in the next episode, we see them at school. And then we learn that Buffy's mom is going to be setting up an art gallery, so that's what she's going to be doing here in town, and that's how she's going to be making a living for them. And in this scene between Buffy and her mom, there's this whole metaphor of like, oh, my mom doesn't understand all the things I'm going through. I mean, for Buffy, it's really true. Like, her mom really doesn't understand everything that she has to go through in being the Slayer. And it's just that whole thing, again, of the show being a metaphor for being a teenager. I like how Joyce is, like, her own, like, fully formed character. And, she has her own struggles and things that she goes through. And she's not just, like, oh, the parent on a teen show that is just there to be parent. I like how Joyce, she feels like a real person to me. Even in this first episode she does, but especially as the season and as the show goes on. And then we have this famous scene of Buffy being followed into the alley, which, like I said before, the main idea for the show, blonde girl walks into an alley and instead of being killed, she's the one that's doing the killing. She's the one that's, killing the person that's trying to kill her. So, and this is Angel. Later we find out that his name's Angel. I'm just going to call him Angel now because that's his name. But so Angel is the second person after Giles who tells her that she needs to fight and face what's coming. Like, she needs to be prepared and she needs to be in this fight.
Don't turn your back on this. You've got to be ready.
What for?
For the harvest.
He also gives her a clue, which is the harvest. The harvest is also the name of the next episode, but he gives her this clue. So we're like, oh, who is this character? What is he gonna mean? Oh, I love that whole line of the,
Who are you?
Let's just say I'm a friend.
Yeah, well, maybe I don't want a friend.
I didn't say I was yours.
I feel like it's kind of clever, and I always really like that line. I mean, it doesn't make a ton of sense when you're looking back on the show. It's like, well, who is he talking about? Who is he a friend of? Because he's saying he's a friend, but he's not hers. So this is what kind of sets up for Buffy that she thinks that, oh, maybe he's a friend of Giles because they seem to be on the same page about a lot of things. So it kind of sets that up. Maybe they're saying that he's his own friend, or maybe he's just lying. Maybe he's just lying. Maybe he was just like, I'm gonna make this girl think that I'm really cool. So I'm going to throw in a cool lie, even though it doesn't make a ton of sense. So then we see that he gives her this cross necklace, which the cross comes into play at the beginning of the next episode, so I won't talk about it yet, but I will talk about when I get to that episode. But just know that we haven't seen the last of that cross. Also, the whole science of crosses and vampires kind of confuses me, but I'm going to get into that a little bit later, a little bit into the next episode. So this is another one of those scenes that was filmed months later to try and tone down the anger, I guess. Buffy was just really, really angry. She was just really angry. They wanted to make her seem a little bit less angry. I mean, I'd be angry too, though, if I had all this responsibility being thrown onto me at 16 years old. I'd be pretty upset too. I'd be like, leave me alone. I just want to live my life. Oh, I love this shot that we have, like, behind Buffy, as she's walking into the Bronze. We follow her from the outside to the inside. We basically never see a shot like that again, but I really like it in this episode. I think it makes it kind of feel really cinematic. Oh, I also love how the bands that they used to play at the Bronze were usually unsigned local bands. Like that's what they usually got. And I like it. It brings this like air of authenticity to it. And also we get to hear some pretty good music throughout the show. Speaking of, got my bronze sign back there. It does light up, but it's very bright. I'm going to try and figure out how to make it a little bit less bright so I can actually turn it on and not have it like blind. But yeah, there's my bronze sign that I made out of cardboard and construction paper. That moment where Buffy waves to someone and then it turns out like that they were waving to someone else. Highly relatable. It's very relatable. This has happened. I feel this has happened to me more than once, but also the guy behind her that the person is actually waving to looks very old. It does not fit in with the crowd of teens that are there. He looks very, very old. So then we have this scene with Buffy and Willow, which really just serves to cement the relationship, cement the friendship between Buffy and Willow, and it also explains the dynamic between Willow and Xander. And then we also learn in this scene that Willow has a crush on Xander. Also, mostly I just want to say that I find myself relating to Willow very much in this scene.
It's hard for me to say anything cool or witty or at all. I can usually make a few vowel sounds and then I have to go away.
Also, I love Buffy's makeup in this scene. It's really great. She did a really good job on that. Then we have this great quote from Buffy.
Seize the moment, because tomorrow you might be dead.
Which is very true, especially true for Buffy the Slayer. This also serves to set up what Willow does next, where Willow then is like, yeah, I'm gonna seize the moment, which didn't really work out for her, but it's not a bad philosophy to have. I think it's a really good philosophy. Also, I think it's really cute how Willow's like, oh, you don't have to come back, and Buffy's like,
I'll be back in a minute.
I love that. Willow's like, you don't have to keep hanging out with me. I get it, like, I'm not cool, you're a very cool person. And I love Buffy's reaction to that too. And then Buffy goes to talk to Giles.
Much rather be at home with a cup of bubbrin and a good book.
You need a personality stat.
And I'm like, I think that what you just said is a personality. It sounds very nice. I also find it kind of funny that Giles is there at all, because he says something like he knew that she would be there, and so I'm just like, oh, did he like go around asking like, hey, where do the kids hang out these days? Where's the hot spot for the kids? Or has he been like scoping out the town? Maybe he's been scoping out the town in the time that he's been there, but I just find that funny though. Giles tried to figure out like, where do the kids hang? And then this one is also when she realizes that Angel is not Giles' friend, so more mystery. And then when Buffy says this line...
I really didn't like him.
I really didn't like that line. I don't like the line itself. Also, the delivery is not good, but like, I don't know how you could deliver that in a good way. I don't know how you could say that well. It's just, yeah, that part I always cringe during that part. And then Jesse's crush on Cordelia comes up again. We saw it a little bit earlier, but we see that it comes up again. And she rejects him, which then sets him up to go and meet Darla, who we saw from the beginning of the episode. And remember that she's a vampire, so this is not good. Oh, I love that.
But you didn't hone.
She's like, no, I'm not in a horror movie. I'm not in a supernatural thing. Whatever. I'm in a teen thing. I'm in my own thing right now. Like, she is subverting all of the rules of a regular horror movie. Also, there's this whole idea that Buffy should be able to sense the vampires, which is something that definitely does not seem to get explored in the show. Like, she can never sense them. I'm like, Buffy, you are the Slayer, you should be able to sense them. But yeah, no, this is something that definitely gets dropped. Buffy does not hone or sense any vampires ever. Something that I like or that I find interesting here is that Buffy uses her old skills to scope out the vampires. Like, the old Buffy, like her keen fashion sense.
Deal with that outfit for a moment.
It's dated.
It's carbon dated. Trust me, only someone living underground for 10 years would think that was still the look.
Which I think is great because it's just as important as her Slayer stuff, which is something that I love in this show. Like, she's not just the Slayer, not just the cool popular girl, you know, and so many other things. She's everything, you know. All the old parts of Buffy and the new parts of Buffy all come together to make one greater Buffy. And I love how it's those skills, those fashion sets and that helps her with her Slayer duties, which is something we'll see later that I think a lot of other Slayers have failed with, is that they just go full Slayer mode and they don't integrate things from their life before. Like, if she didn't have those other parts of her, she wouldn't be a great Slayer, but if she wasn't the Slayer, then she wouldn't be the Buffy, so empathetic Buffy that we know now, or that, we'll know soon when we get to know her a little bit better. So we see that Willow is taking Buffy's advice and seizing the day, and chatting up the head vampire. Also, it's interesting, we see that Giles knows Willow, and he's like, oh, what is she doing? Like, he knows who Willow is, and he knows her well. Like, he knows her well enough to know that that's not something that she would normally do. And I love that. I love to see that they have some kind of a relationship beforehand. I mean, like librarian and student relationship, but I love that they had a little bit of a relationship before the show even started, and we see that grow throughout the show. But I just love the idea of that, the idea that the little interactions that they had, and that he knew her so well and knew that she wouldn't be there, the little interactions that they had before the show even started. Then we have this classic Cordelia line.
God! What is your childhood trauma?
Also, I find it funny that she's like, I have to call everyone I've ever met. And I'm like, aren't all your friends there? Like, isn't all of Sunnydale High right there? Who's at home? Why would you be calling these people who are at home who clearly aren't cool enough to be at the Bronx tonight, you know? And then, oh no, Jesse's in trouble with Darla. And then we see this bubbling pool of blood again, bubbling beneath the surface again. And then he rises out of the pool of blood with no blood on him whatsoever, except for in his boots. And then we have the Master, who's played by Mark Metcalf. He did a lot of comedy before this, like Seinfeld and Animal House, and most people who auditioned for this did like a real villain kind of thing, but he brought some humor to it and this kind of charm, which again goes to the idea of the show of combining things like horror and comedy into one and not just making it a straight horror or a straight comedy. Here we learn that the Master is trapped down below. As I know later on in seasons there's this kind of running problem where the big bads of the season, it's like, why aren't they going after Buffy this week? Did they take some time off? Were they on vacation? Like, what are they doing? This worked really well in the first season of having him trapped down there, and that's why he wasn't trying to go after Buffy every week, because he literally could not. And then we learn about, Willow's in trouble, and I like this line where Buffy says,
We don't find her, and there's gonna be one more dead body in the morning.
it feels really impactful when she says it, and like she says it with complete conviction, and the way she's saying it, like if I was Xander, like I'd be taking her seriously too in that moment. Oh, when he says,
I think I'm gonna go.
Is that what you think?
is bad. It's really, really bad. Then we got Willow and Jesse, who are just seem to be two really easy targets. And then we have Buffy, who is like so much stronger than a lot of the villains, a lot of the things that she faces, all the monsters that she faces. So it's hard to put her in danger a lot of the time. So instead, what they do is they put the characters around her in danger, like Willow and Jesse right now. They're in great peril, and Buffy's not so much. So then we see our first vampire dusting, and we learn that whenever a vampire is killed, they turn to dust. And that was just for convenience, so that they didn't have to have them cleaning up the dead bodies at the end of every episode, which definitely makes sense and makes things a lot cleaner and easier, just in general. I mean, there are lots of demons that they have to bury the bodies, but I wonder where they put all the bodies, all those demons that they kill. I wonder what they do with them. Also, these effects, a lot of these effects are very 90s effects. But honestly, watching the show now, I think it looks fine. I mean, I've seen worse. I've seen a lot worse effects. Oh, and I love how Buffy gives the two options, and the one option she says,
We're talking violence, strong language, adult content.
and it's just kind of funny because there isn't any strong language or adult content. So then in this moment, it's like, is Buffy finally coming into her own? Or is Buffy giving some kind of false bravado to get through this situation? And I think it's a little bit of both. I think that Buffy has finally accepted who she is and accepted what she has to do, and I think she's accepted that she's a Slayer, everything that comes with. But I also think a little bit of it is false bravado so that make it seem like, she's totally in control, so that then the vampires will think, oh, she's totally in control. And then we see that Buffy is still scared, like she's not invincible. She is still human, she's a superhuman, but she still has real fear because she's still human. And let's not forget, she's only 16 years old. Also, I'm just going to mention here that I do not see the necklace on Buffy here, the cross necklace. I only mention this because the next episode that picks up right where this one left off, yeah, I don't see a necklace here. And then it says to be continued, just to get the viewers to keep watching. Tune in next week. Although I'm pretty sure this aired on the same night. Get them to keep watching for the next 2 minutes from now. And then here, Luke, the vampire, refers to Buffy as a little girl. And that's something that the show kind of did in the beginning, where people didn't know that she was the Slayer. They really underestimated her. It's, great when their expectations are subverted, just like the audiences are when it turns out that, no, she's a lot more than that. She is a girl. but she's so, you know, she encompasses many things, and she's very strong and powerful. Like all girls, like all people. So I'll mention this now, that something that I really like about this show is that the characters and, you know, the female characters on the show, they aren't just one thing. They're many different things. They're not just one trait or one quality or like one, like a caricature or whatever. Like Buffy isn't just the, you know, girly girl who likes clothes and keeps up with the trends, and she's also, you know, really quirky and jokey and very strong and determined and loyal and loving, and she's just encompasses so many different things, and she's not just one thing. She's not just the nerd or the popular girl or the superhero. She's all of these things in one. And it's also like she is like other girls. And that's okay, you know? Other girls are awesome. She's like Cordelia in lots of ways. She's like Willow in other ways. She's, not that they're one-dimensional characters either, but there's more to everybody than people see on the surface. Like, there's this line in the Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie that I just really love, where Buffy is talking to Luke Perry, who plays Pike in the movie.
You know, Buffy, you're not like other girls.
I just love that. I mean, I can't believe that that was a line in a movie in 1992, because I feel like that's something that we're still talking about today. Guys tell girls that, in movies and stuff, that they're not like other girls. Like, you're different from other girls. Other girls, they're vapid and, you know, insecure and whatever. They're stupid, other girls. But you're special, you know, you're different. You're a cool girl, you're good. And I just love that idea that Buffy is like other girls. And other girls are awesome. And there's all those other girls that you think are so vapid or stupid or whatever. There's a lot more to them. And I don't know, that's just something that I really love about the show, and that the show kind of shows. And then we've got like the title of the show itself, called Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So Buffy, there's the comedy, vampire, there's the horror, and then Slayer, there's the action. It's got like those three genres there, and then it has even more genres than that. And I think, you know, like I said, that's part of what Buffy is, that it just, you know, genre busting and subverting expectations, and it does all these things, and I love watching it and talking about it, and I hope you guys will semi-enjoy it too. So yeah, I'm going to be doing videos like this. Like I said, I'm going to be doing a video for every episode of the series. Yeah, I can't wait to get into Buffy. This is only the first episode of Buffy, and there's so many things that I would like to say even in this first episode, but I'm trying to do non-spoilery, like maybe like kind of like minor spoilers. Like, I don't want to say there'll be no spoilers, and if you want to see this episode, you'll be fine, because I don't want to have any responsibility in spoiling anything for anybody, no matter how small. This is like spoiler light. I'm going to be doing other TV shows too. They'll be coming out really soon, so look out for that. Bye. Thanks for watching. I linked down to my social media down below for this channel, and I have a couple Buffy specific social media things down below that I put down there, so feel free to reach out, let me know anything, whatever.